If I asked you how much you think your life would be worth, what would your answer be? $1,000,000, $100, somewhere in between? Well, either way, it's impossible to actually calculate a human being's worth, of course. That's why this is such a silly question. But nonetheless, this question really does get you thinking about your life. Well, this story, 3 Days of Happiness, makes you rethink your entire life in the best way possible, making you question if you're really living the life that you've always wanted to live. A life full of happiness, potential, and value. Meet Kisanoki, a 20-year-old broke, depressed college student who isn't really living his life, but more so just gliding through it. He doesn't have purpose, ambitions, and just really doesn't care about his life whatsoever. He works as a waiter so he can fund his two favorite things: musical CDs and books. But even with his job, he's still dead broke and barely can afford his bills. So one day he decides he has no choice but to sell his CDs and books. He ends up going to a bookstore where he ends up meeting a very strange man. This man owns a bookstore and realizes pretty quickly that Kusunoki is dead broke. And the man asks him if he would be willing to sell some of his lifespan, with the man proceeding to give Kusunoki directions to a certain store that will legit buy people's lifespans. Now, Kusanagi, reasonably so, looks at this dude like he's out of his damn mind and is really skeptical of, like, if this is even true, if this is even a real thing, which, fair enough. But curiosity does get the best of him, and he ends up going to this location that the man told him to. When he gets there, he finds a very lavish, fancy-looking shop that is only being run by one worker. A very young woman who asks Kisanaki if he would be willing to sell his lifespan, his health, or his time, with Kusunoki saying lifespan. And when he's actively selling it to this person, he's thinking to himself how his life is going to be worth so much, going to be worth millions of dollars, just for him to find out that his total remaining lifespan, which is 30 years and 3 months, is worth a grand total of 300,000 yen, which is about $2,000 USD. Kusunoki legit got the bare minimum, as the mysterious company who buys this lifespan guarantees that no matter what, if someone decides to sell one of these three things, they will get something in return, even if they have absolutely no value whatsoever in one of these three categories. And how they calculate how much a person's lifespan really is by how much they contribute to society in their lifetime, their overall future happiness and quality of life, and how many dreams or goals they achieve in said lifetime. It's like when you participate in sports and you end up getting last place but get a participation medal anyway. Kusunogi decides to sell off all of his remaining years, only keeping those 3 months left, aka leaving only 3 months for him to live. And this is a huge wake-up call for Kusunoki, because this man legit basically got told that he's human garbage, that his life is worth nothing, which causes him to start to really reflect on his life and what he wants to do with these remaining 3 months he has left. So right away, he just drops out of college and quits his job, as he doesn't want to be worrying about work and school in his last 3 months, which who can blame the man? I wouldn't want to be either. He makes a list of all the things that he wants to do before he dies, with the first thing that he does is reunite with his best friend from high school, which he hasn't talked to in years. Kusunogi these last couple of years decided that he just wanted to cut off everyone and completely isolate himself from everyone. So with him only having 3 months left to live, he has a change of heart. It'd also be a good time for me to introduce the protagonist of this story, Miyagi, who is actually the girl that was working when Kusunogi sold his lifespan. Miyagi is Kusunogi's observer, who's basically someone who watches over a person that sold their lifespan and has a very, very short amount of time left to live, tracking everything the person does in their last days and making sure they don't do any illegal activities. She is always around him nonstop, kind of being like a voice of reason for him. Anyway, going back to Kusunogi's reunion with his high school best friend, it ends up being a very shitty reunion. At first, things are good with him and his old friend. They're catching up, they're talking, they're laughing. But as Kusunogi is talking to his friend, he's realizing at the same time that things just aren't the way that it used to be. With his friend being almost like a new person since when he last saw him, with this friend also pissing off and annoying Kusunogi so much to the point that he lashes out and throws his drink at the wall, then just immediately leaves this restaurant. And it makes sense this reunion played out the way it did, because Kusunogi literally cut this person off from his life, just completely stopped talking to him the last couple of years, and he thinks he can just kind of willy-nilly go back to this friend and act like nothing happened and just go back to the way that things were back in high school. It's a foolish thing for him to assume. Things change, people change, and Kusunogi realizes how foolish he was for thinking that he could just go back and talk to all these old people in his life, with him realizing that a huge mistake he made in his life was cutting off all of his friends and family and everyone that cared about him. And he's really starting to cherish Miyagi's constant company. At first, Kusanagi saw Miyagi as someone who was just a huge annoyance to him. But after being around her so much, and of course realizing that he made a huge mistake by completely isolating himself from all the people that he cared about, he's starting to see Miyagi more as a friend than an annoyance. He's starting to cherish their time together and develop a real bond with her. But even after this horrible reunion, there's still one more person he just has to reach out to, and that person is his childhood crush, Hamino. Kusunogi has not talked to Hamino in years, but he's always been in love with her since they were very little, with him needing to confess his true feelings to her before he dies. So he tracks her down, the two actually coming back on good terms again, and eventually even getting dinner together. Kusunogi is living out his dream right now. To prepare for this dinner, he got himself new fancy clothes, a nice haircut, basically fixing himself up and just not looking like a complete homeless person, and even prepared himself by taking Miyagi out and acting like they were on a date just to get ready for his actual date with Hamino. The two catch up fairly quickly, having a great chemistry, with it almost seeming like these two have always just been super great friends. Halfway through the dinner though, Kusunogi ends up ranting about how he sold his lifespan and how there's this invisible girl next to him named Miyagi, which, to give some context, because I know I didn't explain this already, Miyagi is completely invisible to everyone around her while she is being Kusunogi's observer, except for Kusunogi, of course. So Himino right now cannot see Miyagi, she can only see Kusunogi. Hearing all this, Himino just laughs it off, then decides to go to the washroom. Minutes, then hours pass by, and that bitch is gone. We end up learning that Himino getting along with Kusunogi was all an act on her end. She actually hated him. When Hamino ditched Kusunogi halfway through their dinner, she ends up leaving him a note, with her saying that her plan was to basically off herself in front of him so he would have to live with the trauma of seeing his childhood crush like die, basically. And her goal and why she wanted to do this was because over these last couple of years, Hamino has been reaching out to Kusunogi. She's been sending him constant letters, but with Kusunogi cutting everyone off and completely isolating himself, Hamino included, he never responded back. And to make matters even worse, these letters that she was sending were like basically cries for help. So naturally, Hamino just gained this deep resentment and hatred for Kusunogi because he never even bothered to reach out to her. So, as I just mentioned, she wanted him to live with the grief and kind of trauma of seeing her die and like basically make him go insane and mad, and this is her way of getting revenge on him, essentially. But she changes her mind and decides to not go through with this plan the moment that Kusunogi starts rambling about Miyagi being this invisible girl and selling his lifespan and all this stuff, right? Because in Hamino's eyes, Kusunogi was already going mad. He's already crazy. So she doesn't need to go and off herself or do anything to get revenge on him because he's already in a pretty pitiful state. This affects Kusunogi a lot. Like, this reunion wasn't like the last one where he reunited with his best friend from high school. This was the girl that he loved for years on end. In Kusunogi's mind, this was the love of his life. And even though he's just devastated by the way that things turned out with Hamino, He moves on pretty quickly from this actually, and just continues to keep living his life the best that he can, which really comes to show how much Kisanogi has changed from the beginning of the story to now. Because at the very beginning of the story, if Kisanogi got put in this exact situation, it probably would have been enough for him to go and off himself or just completely give up on his life. Now, Kisanogi sees the value in his life and decides to use his bad experience from Hamino as something he can just learn from. Going forward from now on, Kisanogi just decides to focus on the little things before he dies. Doing things like making tons of paper cranes, going on countless walks to enjoy beautiful views. All things that he saw as a huge waste of time before. And for a majority of people, these things would be a waste of time, but they're not. If there's one thing to take away from Kusanogi's character development so far, it's that time is precious. And the simple things in life, such as going on walks and drives, having a simple conversation with your neighbor or friend, all these things, even though they seem so small, have so much value. Seeing Kisanogi realize this is such a beautiful part of his character. Kusanogi starts going around all of Japan with Miyagi, taking photos of just every single vending machine that he crosses. Doesn't matter how big, small, ugly, flamboyant the vending machine is, whatever it is, if it's a vending machine, he's taking a damn photo of it. With his goal being to take a photo of every single vending machine in Japan, or at least like a pretty good number of them. And the reason he's doing this is simply just because he wants to, just because he finds enjoyment from it. This basically becomes a full-time job for Kusanogi, as he spends countless hours traveling and taking photos of vending machines. Really what makes this time so special for Kusanogi though is spending it with Miyagi. Kisanogi and Miyagi are pretty much in love with each other at this point. It's during these simple travels that these two go on to go take photos of vending machines that ends up being some of the best times of their life. One day though, Miyagi gets a day off. So Kusanogi gets a replacement observer just for one day, who is this middle-aged man that looks like he's a raging alcoholic. Tells Kusanogi how his life is completely worthless and has no value whatsoever. And you guys know how I talked about the general requirement, where if someone sells their lifespan, health, or time, they are guaranteed some kind of money or something in return, even if they offer this mysterious company no value whatsoever. Of course, in Kusanogi's case, since he sold his lifespan, he was guaranteed at least $2,000. That was a lie. There was no guaranteed return, no guaranteed cash, anything like that. Kusanogi's life was legit worth $0, and he should have gotten $0 for his lifespan. The only reason he got $3,000 was because Miyagi sold some of her own lifespan and then proceeded to give that money to Kisanogi, lying to him saying, hey, this is how much your lifespan's worth. When Kusanogi learns this information, he realizes how amazing Miyagi truly is and how in love with her he really is as well. With him confessing to her in a very unique but beautiful way. With him going out the next day after he learns all the information from this old man who was his replacement observer. Him and Miyagi go out to a beautiful lake and stargaze when he confronts Miyagi about the $3,000 and how she gave it to him, wondering why she would do something like that. With Miyagi responding by saying that she gave him the $2,000 out of her own pocket because she just simply felt like it. It's like when you just have this need or just feeling that you can't get rid of when you just have to do something, where you think about it or worry about it so much to the point where you just do it. That's essentially what happened to Miyagi in this case. She felt like she just had to give Kusanogi something in return and not let his lifespan be worth nothing. Kusanogi then hugs Miyagi, showing us one of my favorite manga panels in this story, and this was the unique but beautiful confession I was talking about. I would say that at this point in the story, this is Kusanogi's way of not only thanking Miyagi for everything she's done for him, but also really kind of confessing his love through physical body language, of course, by hugging her and having that physical touch. As from this point onwards, They basically are a couple. The next day, Kusunogi is replaying in his mind everything Miyagi and the old man told him about the value of a person's lifespan. And he realizes that his lifespan should actually be worth something now, as his quality of life and mood have greatly improved. So, Kusunogi comes up with a new goal for himself before he dies, which is to raise his remaining lifespan's value as much as possible so that way he can sell it off and kind of repay Miyagi. And Kusunogi is not only deciding to do this because he wants to repay Miyagi's kindness. The actual reason he's doing this is because when Miyagi was a child, her mother sold off her time for money, which is basically where you just have to work for this company that buys all this bizarre shit from people, right? The time, health, lifespan, all that stuff. Miyagi's mom was an observer herself, but she died in some accident before completing her contract, basically still having work to do. So this debt of not paying off the rest of her time passes on to her daughter, Miyagi. So Miyagi has to work in her mother's stead. And Miyagi started working as an observer when she was only 10, and she's currently 20 right now, and will have to work until she's 40. So she still has 20 years left of this contract. Then the debt that her mother left behind will be fulfilled. Kusunogi decides to kill two birds with one stone by basically living this great life with Miyagi, being with her, going out with her, going on dates with her, meeting new friends, etc. And while he's living this amazing, good, happy life, at the same time, he's also raising his value, as well as give Miyagi the life that she never had. Miyagi has never experienced a normal life. After raising his value and spending all this amazing time with Miyagi, Kusunogi decides that it's time to sell off his remaining lifespan. At this point in the story, only 1 month has passed, so he still has 2 out of his original 3 months left, and decides to sell off everything except for 3 days. After he sells his lifespan, him and Miyagi part ways, as someone with only 3 days left to live doesn't get watched over anymore. Basically, they just don't have an observer. So Miyagi does not have to fulfill her duties of being Kusunogi's observer any longer. The first day by himself, Kusunogi is naturally very, very lonely. He finally has the time to himself to do a lot of reflection and reflect on the life that he's lived so far. And he realizes that he doesn't regret a single thing. That the last month of his life had more value, happiness, and meaning than those 30 years he was originally going to live would have ever had. After enjoying his day, Kusunogi goes to a park, where he starts to just bawl his eyes out and get really emotional because he's starting to realize how important Miyagi really was to him now that she's gone. But she kind of pops out of nowhere again, and not out of obligation this time, out of her own free will. The two hug and kiss, with Miyagi telling Kusunogi that she sold off all of her remaining lifespan just to be with him, only leaving them 3 days to be together. And the story ends off with Kusunogi saying that those last 3 days he spent with Miyagi were some of the best days of his entire life. A happy ending done frickin' right. At its core, 3 Days of Happiness is, of course, a romance story. And it's a very beautiful one at that. But it's not the romance that truly makes the story amazing or life-changing as I've described it. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing Miyagi and Kusunogi's relationship develop over time, with them gaining this very amazing love for each other. But the most important and impactful thing about this story is truly finding value in your life. For example, Kusunogi, at the start of the story, he hated his life, he was depressed, just living on autopilot with no inherent meaning. The only thing that changed when he sold his lifespan was the fact that now he knew how much longer he had to live, and he had a time limit, of course. But even then, for quite some time there, Kusunogi still lives the same way. He still hates his life, he's still depressed, etc. Only real change starts to happen when Kusunogi changes his mindset and perspective. When he starts to value the little things in life, when he starts to value his relationship with Miyagi, when he starts to value the connections he gained with others, when he starts to pursue new interests and hobbies, growing and learning from each and every single experience that he has. he truly starts to value his life and his time and finds worth in himself. He still had the exact same quality of life as when before he sold his lifespan, but the only reason things changed was because he changed. Of course, him having only 3 months left to live was the catapult, I would say, to this change. But at the end of the day, it's all about finding meaning, valuing your time, and really living the life you want to live. Finding value in the little things and living in the present. Like Kusunogi taking photos of random ass vending machines. It's so dumb and pointless and stupid. But to him, it made him happy. It made him memories, and it ended up being some of the best times of his entire life. Even though something so small with no meaning was so important and gave Kusunogi so much value because he was living in the present. He was enjoying all the small little things in life. Something that all of us, myself included, have to practice. As humans, we're also focused on the big things, always getting caught up in our futures and where we'll be in 10, 5 or so years, that sometimes we just completely forget about the present. The small things in life that bring us joy and happiness, and truly doing the things that you want to do, valuing your time and living the life that you want to live. And before I end this video, let me just ask you, if you could sell your lifespan, how much do you personally think it would be worth? I'd love to hear your answers in the comments, but if you answered this question saying that your life would be worth a lot, I think that's a great thing to say. But if you truly do think your life would be worth like pretty much nothing, it might be worth asking yourself if you're really valuing your time, valuing the present moment, valuing the little things in your life, and just living the life that you want to truly be living.